Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Smolar, we have considered the issue you raised in your testimony so many times, so many different ways, because it can be characterized by some that if you don't follow the strict sentencing guidelines, that you're soft on crime, that you really don't care enough to impose the adequate sentence. What you tell us is less than 30% of non-production child pornography offenders were sentenced within the recommended guidelines, reflecting broad judicial satisfaction, 70%, and inconsistent sentencing nationwide. You say, as federal prosecutors, my colleagues and I often considered plea offers to binding sentences to avoid the application of the insufficient sentencing guidelines and disparities. Tell me a little more. What are you talking about here?
Especially in cases where you're talking about, for example, possession of CSAM, where there's no mandatory minimum sentence. Oftentimes, my colleagues and I, and not just in the Western District of Pennsylvania, but nationwide, would see sentences that we felt were insufficient. When you're talking about possession of CSAM, you are talking about a real child being harmed in the most serious way possible. And I personally believe that sentences for people who are collecting that type of material should be significant in order to protect victims and to deter others from collecting it. So it's important that the sentencing guidelines are useful to judges.
Let me ask you, I understand part of the problem was a numeric issue.
Yes.
Initially, so many instances of objects that a person had led to a certain sentencing guideline. But now that they're being collected in video form or in different technology form, that counting numbers really doesn't tell the story. Is that your impression?
It doesn't. All we were talking about math. It's not about math. These are about real offenders and culpability and risk. For example, what you're referring to is one video is 75 images under the sentencing guidelines. You start adding up videos to try to get to 600 images and you get a 5-point enhancement. Use of a computer is a 2-point enhancement. Prepubescent children, 2-point enhancement. But that doesn't really tell the story of these offenders and how dangerous they potentially are. So legislation will be needed to address, are they on specific darknet forums talking about how to abuse children? Are they using multiple platforms to try to get to children or to share this material? Are they, how severe are the images and how many victims are in them? That is not necessarily encompassed by the sentencing guidelines right now. So legislation is needed to address offender risk.
Ms. Coffrin, I was interested with the chairman's question that you responded that sometimes the object of this exploitation is chaos. It's not financial. Tell me a little more on that. What is the value of this perpetrator wasting all of these hours leading to the self-harm of a young person or worse?
Right. Thank you so much for that question, Senator. What we are seeing is these loosely coordinated groups that you've been referencing, like 764 and some of these other that we are referencing as sadistic online, are fueled and motivated by being able to have clout and notoriety for the impact of their actions. This means it extends much more beyond just CSAM. It is how can they use children to harm themselves or the others, and then harm the community as well. So we also see children being coerced into planning school shootings or threatening their communities as well, that are also offshoots of this type of work. So child sexual exploitation has actually been hijacked as one methodology for a larger way of trying to be able to use children against the community and for shock and for awe. The more that we talk about this, unfortunately, we feed their desire for that notoriety, for the impact that they're having, and these sometimes called nihilistic violent groups as well, it is really fueled by something that we're just not that familiar with operating with, which is pure chaos.
Ms. Woods, how long do you think your son was being exploited before he finally lost his life?
It was 19 and a half hours. Well, he received 200 messages in 19 and a half hours. with what we believe 4 different people attacking him at one time.
Do you have any idea where the source of these attacks was?
His murderers are in Ivory Coast.
Oh.
And we, of course, don't have, we're told we'll never receive justice for James.
I'm so sorry for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, all three of you.
Thank you, Senator Durbin.